1999, Morpheus offered Neo a choice between a red pill and a blue pill. In 2018, this country fractured between red and blue. In 2022, I'm here to tell you that if you really want the truth, more voters are neither red or blue. Yet, they have no representation, no choice, and no options. They have to choose between candidates chosen by the red people or the blue people. I'm David Esrati, and I'm running for Congress as an American, as in red, white, and blue. I'm a veteran, an activist, and a small businessman. I'm asking you to join me in reminding the professional politicians in Congress who their bosses are. I support ranked choice voting, campaign finance reform, and a verified voter information system, all so we can stop having the best politicians money can buy. It's time to elect a veteran who will work for you, no matter what color they want to label you. Please go to electesrati.com and learn more. I'm David Esrati, and I approve this message. In Jurassic Park, you thought those little baby dinosaurs were cute until they turned into out-of-control carnivores. That's sort of what happens to government when we elect people based on very expensive advertising campaigns and propaganda. I'm David Esrati. I'm a veteran and a small businessman running for Congress. You don't want professional ad people and pollsters to sway your vote. All those hot-button issues like gun control, abortion, borders are all politicized to stop you from voting rationally. And thinking rationally seems to be in short supply these days. Most Americans have been voting against their own best self-interest for a long time because we've allowed money to buy our leaders. 1 million Americans died in the last 2 years because our leaders couldn't lead. It wasn't that hard. Mask, distance, test, and then vaccinate. In an instant, we had billions to spend on healthcare for COVID, when for years we've been told we can't provide healthcare for everyone equally in this country. That's an unintended consequence of the pandemic. If you think about it, our government can pretty much do whatever it wants, or what the people who buy our politicians tell our leaders to do. We also had a ton of money to prop up businesses. And next thing you know, it turns out that a living wage was not only possible, but necessary. As a small businessman who won't sell you out to corporate interests and lobbyists, I can tell you that it's time to fully understand the consequences of companies like Amazon, Facebook, and Google and their effect on small business, and to remind you that small business is the #1 creator of jobs in this country. So this next election, don't trust this ad or any other political ad. Do your homework and think before you vote. It's time to put this ad man in Congress because I know that the best advertising is based on the truth, not the size of the budget or payola. Or you can just vote based on who has the money to buy their way into Congress and live with the consequences. I'm David Esrati, and I approve this message. Hi, I'm David Esrati. I'm running for Congress, and thank you for joining me. This is my live stream town hall. This is what I plan to do when I'm in Congress. After I'm done doing the people's work for the day, I plan to talk to the people to let you know what I did, why I did it, what the issues are. So every day we try to pick another topic and something interesting to talk about here, and we ask for you to interact. You can ask questions through the chat. I see the chat. Feel free to say hello that you're here. I see we had a viewer, now we don't. But what we're going to talk about today is sort of a continuation of what we talked about yesterday. We talked about affordable housing, and today we're talking about climate change, and the two are related. I mean, part of the problem is the planet is exploding with people. I mean, we've basically gone from a couple billion to coming up to 7 and 8 billion in less than 100 years. That's a huge amount of growth. We think New York's a big city. India, China have cities that are way bigger. We think it's amazing that we pick up the trash in New York and China and New York City. in China, in Shanghai, and some of these cities that are just packed full of people. There are even bigger obstacles. But one of the things they've done well, and we have not, is mass public transit. Somewhere along the line, America became run by General Motors, Ford, and Chrysler, where they thought everything was great if we could have a car. In fact, 2 cars in every driveway, in every garage. We became very car-centric. And that's also made us very oil-dependent. And that's also caused us to build a whole lot of infrastructure that takes a whole lot of energy and then has people using a whole lot of energy to move on that infrastructure. So when I was reading the New York Times this morning, which I do every day because it's easier to read it today than read it 2 days later in the Dayton Daily News in a shortened version, I saw 2 articles that I found interesting. Actually, there were 3, but the third one we might talk about tomorrow. But the first one was that France was considering a ban on private jets. You say, oh, this is just trying to attack the rich. And they'd actually made a law that said that if you can get there by 2 hours by car or 2 hours by train, you can't take a private jet. That's a starting point. And you got to realize they have high-speed rail. They have a great highway system. And distances are quite a bit shorter in Europe than they are here. What would happen if we put those rules in practice here? Well, there will be a lot of rich people that would be very unhappy because we don't have any alternatives other than flying commercial. You are not going to get anywhere any faster by car or by rail because we just don't have that infrastructure in place. We don't care about moving people efficiently, and we don't care about building places for people to live near where they work. In fact, this is an affordable housing argument that's been going on and on about people in like Cupertino, where the people who clean Apple's headquarters can't live in the same city because there's just no housing that they can afford on the pay they make. There was a story about San Jose, I believe it was, or San Diego, where a starting police officer's pay of $189,000 a year almost rivals what they pay the mayor. And at $189,000, it's almost impossible to find housing. That's insane. So what do we have to do to solve this? So that was France's thing. We're going to ban private jets, which is a very small percentage of the amount of flights. But they said for every person moved, you end up with something like 10 times the pollution of moving that person by commercial airline. Of course, a commercial airliner has 100 to 200 people in it or more, and the private jet carries 8 to 12. So they're saying no more taking your private jet when you could take commercial or you could take the train. It's a start. California's, been leading the way on energy efficiency for cars with their standards for mileage and everything else for a long time. And they pretty much set the standards. And we have these standards called CAFE standards. Don't ask me what it stands for. But the goal was to raise them each year so that we would get more efficient automobiles. And then Donald Trump came along and said, oh, no, we don't need these. And now they're putting back in place. And the goal was the average car sold in America from each manufacturer had to average like 40 miles a gallon. And by 2035 would have to average 50. So they had to get either lighter, smaller, or have other alternative sources of fuel so that they could get equivalent mileage. So that's why you saw a move to hybrid cars, which routinely get 50 miles a gallon, and to electrics. But California said, oh, we can do one better. We're going to say after 2035, you can't buy a gas-powered vehicle new in California. I imagine you could still buy them used. And what would this do? This would force them to either work on infrastructure for electric cars and to get ready between now and 2035, or develop other forms of propulsion like hydrogen, or who knows what else. I mean, even CNG, compressed natural gas, is very efficient and burns very clean. You do have CNG vehicles right here in Dayton. RTA buses run on it, and there's a CNG station down by Montgomery County Public Waste, the dump down on Nicholas Road down there. So there are CNG filling stations, and you can go pretty far. One of the things with CNG, though, it does have the possibility of making a pretty big fireball in a collision. So that's one of the drawbacks there. Of course, they say electric cars can turn into toaster ovens pretty quick as well. But if you're in those kinds of accidents, even in a regular car, it can catch on fire and all kinds of other things. But so California is making this step and saying, okay, people, you better start waking up, because in about 12, 13 years from now, you're not going to be able to make your living or drive a gas-powered vehicle. So what are we going to do? Now, they've been talking about building high-speed rail between LA and San Francisco, and then even down to San Diego for a long time. Whether that will actually get done in time, who knows? That was one of the things that Elon Musk was talking about with his Boring Company. That's actually the name of the company, the Boring Company. They dig tunnels faster than anybody else, and those tunnels would help secure vehicles through, or his Hyperloop system, which claims that he can transport people at 700 miles an hour through a closed tube using basically vacuum compressed air. So Bill Mavar, who is an expert at everything automotive, he is one of our viewers. He says hydrogen power has already proven itself to be pretty impractical. Well, they said that about electric cars about, I don't know, turn of the century, because we actually did have electric cars back then. And who knows, we might be able to make an advance. I think the premise isn't using hydrogen as you actually fill up with hydrogen. You fill up with water, and then you somehow split the water and generate your own hydrogen internally. They're working on schemes like that, but I don't know if that's happening either. But it was an interesting idea. The fact is, California has a lot of people, and if you've driven in California or been on the highways, you see what a problem is when you've got millions of people on highways, one person per car. It fills up pretty quick. It's an inefficient way of operating. So let's go to solutions. How about denser housing, higher density housing? That's something we're not seeing emphasized in America. If you put people in higher density housing, you then make a trade area that businesses can afford to deliver to and to sell to. So one of the reasons supposedly we don't have a really nice grocery store down here in South Park is we didn't have enough rooftops with high enough incomes to support a real grocery store. Well, I think that's absolute bunk at this point, because the amount of housing that's been built downtown, the amount of conversions, the valuations of the properties in South Park, the expansion of other downtown living options should have enough rooftops at this point to justify something bigger than the tiny Kroger we have, and the few other small grocers like Halal International Market right up the street from me, which people often forget is a grocery store. And yes, you can buy everything there you need to survive. Really nice guys, great story there. So, not our normal type of thing. So I was recently talking to the president of the University of Dayton about plans for UD, and one of the things I said, desperately need a grocery store. You've got all these students packed into what was used to be called the ghetto, but is now UD's community housing, where kids are living in houses just like what we have. They have their own kitchens, they have to cook. How far do they have to go to get groceries? And how do they go do that other than cars? And you have a problem. We could, just when UD's in a session, have enough rooftops, enough bodies, enough people, along with other housing, if we built some more high density housing, support a grocery store real easily right at the corner of Brown and Stewart. Of course, universities aren't in the business of creating grocery stores, but they seem to be in the business of doing something else, because they've managed to find money to invest in the arcade, and have even created a free bus, which I call the White Flyer, which everybody has a problem with, But it's funny, the only free bus in town runs through the white community side. But you could put a bus there. If you can do that and bus your students down to the hub, well, think about it. If we build a grocery store at the corner of Brown and Stewart, you could also put a bus that goes free from Brown and Stewart all the way out to the Dayton VA and engage people on the west side with all those businesses along Brown Street that they don't have on the west side. You could ride the free bus down, walk over and go to Chipotle, go to Five Guys, enjoy your meal, and take a bus back. And guess what? We have helped solve climate change right there, because a bus is a much more efficient way, especially when full, to transport people from point A to point B. And then you'd have them connect with another bus line that would go downtown, and they could take the bus over after they've had their meal. They could grab the other flyer and go watch a free show down at the pavilion, the Levitt Pavilion, on one of the weeknights in the summer. So it's a matter of thinking, of putting things together, piecing things together, that you get creative solutions to solve problems. We don't have to solve climate change by, massive changes in how we get our energy. What we can change our consumption by thinking better about how we put together people and jobs and community resources like pharmacies and grocery stores. That is what urban planning is about, and all urban planners will talk about density, walkable communities, public transit as functioning parts of a healthy community. And healthy communities are what we want. Now, we could also talk about planting trees and rotating crops and all kinds, switching to hydropower, solar, geothermal. We could talk about wind power. There are a multitude of things to talk about in terms of climate change. But if we keep growing in population and everybody keeps aspiring to get a car and to get from point A to point B, it's not going to get any better. Cars are inefficient. Bicycles, great. Okay, let's expand bike share. Let's make bike share free. If you've ever been to Amsterdam, there are bikes everywhere. The entire country runs on bicycles. It's a compact community. Getting a driver's license is expensive. Owning a car is expensive. Do we want to move that way? We can't, because we built an infrastructure that doesn't work without a car. So, what does that mean for you thinking about voting for somebody in Congress? That's not going to be the main thing I'm going to go and do. But when there are issues like this, at least I can discuss with experts and ask good questions to get better answers so that we can have guidance and go in the right direction. And that's what we need to do. Some people say voting this is as easy as driving a stick shift. You vote D to drive, to go forward, or you vote R to go Republican and go backward. Someone else said it, not me, but it feels that way oftentimes. There's a lot of people in denial about what Republican standards stand for and what their ideas are, but we've got to move forward on climate change because it's going to affect all of us. There's now people making prognoses that this part of Ohio will be in a heat belt in the next 10 years, and we will have a 125 degree heat index during the summer, which is really rough. We're not built for it. We don't have the infrastructure for it, and it will be painful. If I wanted to live in Florida, I'd move to Florida. Dayton, Ohio shouldn't have a heat index of 125 ever. Again, as long as we keep depending on the systems we have, this is what we will get. If there are any questions, I'd be happy to answer. If you want to just say hello, that'd be great. I do this every day at 4 o'clock. I try to pick an interesting subject. I appreciate anybody who watches either now or in the follow-up. We're working on some things for the campaign. You'll know about them first, either here or through the site. If you sign up at electesrati.com/ask act as a volunteer or donate to make a donation as small as $3, I'd appreciate it. You will get a weekly newsletter of what's going on and what we're thinking about and everything else. You can also find out more on my blog, Esrati.com, where I still do try to post news items and let people know what's going on. And again, we're working on a fundraiser and some other things. I don't see any other questions. It's been fun. It's been real. We'll see you tomorrow at 4 o'clock. I thank you so much for tuning in or watching. And please remember, election's coming up. I need you to spread the word to your friends. Make sure they're registered to vote. They're up to date. Find people who are not registered. Get them registered. Especially talk to women who are concerned about their rights and access to critical medical care. It's not just about abortion. It's about saving their lives in cases of rape, incest, or a tubal pregnancy. So, want to move forward? Let's get going. Thank you so much.